All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of No Chats. On today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into pen testing, looking at both the good, the bad, and what it looks like in 2020. I'm delighted to have a guest with me today. I've got Shaun from CBI Secure, who is the Senior Vice President. Shaun, welcome. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Neil. I'm looking forward to conversations here today.
Yeah, great. So what I'd like to do is just for the folks who likely don't know who you are, can you give us a bit of an intro about yourself, your background, and the organization?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a company called CBI. We're a business that's been in existence for the last 25 years. The best way I describe our company is cybersecurity isn't something we do, it's all we do. And we've been doing it for a very long time. I'm our Senior Vice President of our Security Programs Division. So that entails ownership of 3 different teams. I run our Strategic Programs team, our Digital Forensics and Incident Response team, and then one of the teams near and dear to my heart, our Red team, which we refer to as our Advanced Testing Services team. I've been at CBI for 18 years. The way I describe myself is just a really extremely passionate resource as it pertains to cybersecurity. Surprisingly, 20, 25 years later since I got into this thing, I'm still excited as the day I got into the industry. And I'm living the dream job, right? I get to run a group of ethical computer hackers and, cutting edge stuff. So it's great stuff.
That's awesome. Thank you. What a great introduction. And I think nothing better there. One of the things I want to get a feel on in your time in the industry. So pen testing is something that has been around. It's probably been around a long time, but we hear more and more about it. Where have you seen it come and go? Like, where has it gone from? If you were to take it back 10 years or maybe 15 years, I know, right? Like, how has that landscape changed?
Considerably, I think, is the easy answer. The evolution of testing. We came from a world, and even before we officially formed our Red Team 12 years ago, we were doing this in some ad hoc capacity. But back then, we're talking about simple systems with limited to no connectivity at that stage, to a drastic transformation to a digital pursuit where everything is connected, everything is in the cloud, and we're so reliant on technology in so many different ways. Back in the day when we were first doing this, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It really was. You could find SQL injection vulnerabilities on any application or website you basically visited. Simple e-commerce hacking tricks of discounting items in the cart. It was the heyday back then, and the cultural perspective was totally different back then too. From the mainstream hacker community, it was a lot of just notoriety. The attacks were really built on establishing some credibility in this underground community. But now how that has changed, right? So it's a purely monetary driven industry and threat landscape that we're dealing with now. So we've seen the increase of things like obviously social engineering attacks and application security attacks. And the industry as red teamers, we've adopted and had to be agile as well, right? So we have adhered to more of a purple team penetration testing methodology that we can talk about later, but really just doing a better job of understanding what the real probable risks are for an organization, because it's nearly impossible to identify 100% of your risks. So let's focus in on those areas that have probable attack scenarios, and we can make some meaningful impact and improving our security posture there.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. That's such a good journey to start this conversation off on. I think, well, one thing that you probably could add to that as well is just the reliance that companies have now on e-commerce applications or online, the interconnected world. Could you imagine, I mentioned this on one of my other podcasts, could you imagine lockdown without the internet?
Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The application, and one thing that was important too, Verizon's got a good report, their DBIR report that comes out every year. It highlighted that point specifically. It talked about how application attacks are on the rise. They're being used as an attack vector time after time. And it's because we need them. We're reliant on them in so many different ways, that from mobile apps to web apps to healthcare apps. I mean, it's an amazing threat landscape that's out there.
Yeah, what a journey you've been on then to see like it's sort of like the birth of this from really working very much corporations in little silos of interconnected sort of communications and machines, and now the World Wide Web is an interconnected Internet of Things. As you say, I think you've seen it go from low-level attacks, more sophisticated attacks, but also as a global reliance has just increased so much from 12 years ago to where we are today.
Look at IoT, and that might be a rudimentary example, but you know, one of the stores here that's known as a hardware store in the United States is Home Depot or Lowe's. It's like the last place on earth you'd expect to see digital devices, but now you walk through these places and it's nothing. Everything's wired. Your hot water tank, your thermostat, your light bulbs, all of these things. And when you talk about what that attack probability looks like, you know, a lot of people say, well, yeah, I don't have too much to worry about, but there's realistic attacks going on. I know there was one a couple years ago where a malicious adversary group hacked into a casino as a result of an IoT device on their fish tank. So in their big fish tank in the auditorium or in the lobby, they had this little IoT device that the bad guys broke into from there, bridged the gap, and basically compromised the majority of the casino. So
once you're in, you're in.
real attacks. Yeah, exactly.
Once you're on that network, you can really do some damage. Yeah, and you would never, like a business owner, a casino owner would never ever think that would be part of the fish tank's installation, that you have to think about the cybersecurity linked to the aquarium.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. What are some of the common misgivings? So, like when you're speaking with businesses, I guess the most common misgiving is that we're totally secure.
Yep.
What are you finding is sort of common misgivings when it comes to your sort of pen testing services?
Yeah, a couple of things. On the side of the interpretation of our services, you know, one of the things that we see a lot is that there's an assumption that the team is built on a bunch of reformed hackers. They were bad guys at one point and they turned good. That's not the case for us. I know in other organizations you might see some of that, but everybody that we have, you know, we got a lot of top secret security clearances. We're ethical. We're moral. Our livelihood and integrity depends on it. The other thing that we see as a misconception is that a red team or a penetration test is going to find 100% of the threats and the risks that are out there. That's just not the case. It's just not possible. It's just not feasible. Unless you have an open checkbook that you can bring a team in for months or years on end, you're not going to accomplish that. So the goal there is, you know, establishing a good sense of expectations and requirements with the customer as to what we're going to be able to accomplish and what the value proposition is. And then overall, you know, the interpretation from the customer side in regards to penetration testing and the value derivative that you're going to see. You see a lot of organizations without an understanding of what we're doing. All right. So they think that we're going to come in and do a bunch of automated scanning and we're going to, it's not, you know, the value with automation is very limited in the pen testing world. So you really need a team of you know, sophisticated and advanced attackers and hackers that have the capability to use manual oriented approach. Last year, so in 2019, I'm a big data guy. I like data analytics. I like big data modeling. We looked at all the engagements that we leveraged last year, which is about 200 or so engagements that we had last year. And roughly 83% of all the critical vulnerabilities, the ones where you kind of want to light your hair on fire and run out of the building because it's kind of that bad, 83% of those could only have been identified via a manual approach. There's no tool, scanner, you know, nothing that's, so companies need to have that understanding that number one, the manual approach is where it's at. Number two, it's going to take a little bit more time and possibly money to leverage that, but that's where the strong value derivative is, as you can see.
And is it always digital related, that when you're doing your pen test, is it typically the compromises that you're most looking for are related to digital flaws or digital fraud, or is it everything? Is it outside of whatever you can find, like however and wherever the crown jewels are? Like, what is it? What is a typical pen test? One, how long does it take? You mentioned time. And two, like, what are you looking for? Is it the digital crown jewels? Is it the, you know, just as part of the many layers you can get into? What are you looking for?
Such a great question, especially coming off our last conversation, is where do we focus our efforts with the finite time that we have, right? So, and generally to answer your question, it ranges as far as level of effort. You know, some engagements are 2 weeks. We just wrapped one up for a big global manufacturing company that took about 6 months with about 6 consultants.
Wow.
But overall, regardless of the size of the company, Neil, you got to leverage the same pursuit of what it is that we're after. We call that threat modeling. All right. It's kind of an often used term, almost more than blockchain. I hate buzz keyword kind of thing. But anyways, threat modeling does have some relation here. And what we're talking about, it sounds like a fancy term, but when you boil it down, what is it that a malicious adversary would be going after in your organization, and what techniques, tactics, and procedures will they use to go after that thing? So think about, maybe from a manufacturing company who's got a lot of, take an automotive company. One of their risks based on that threat model is ransomware, right? So ransomware could interrupt the availability, cause loss of revenue in the millions of dollars per hour, right? So the steps that an attacker is going to use to get ransomware into your environment is somewhat prescriptive. So we're going to emulate that attack scenario and that attack path, and that's where we're going to get a lot of value from. So when you look at the threat model for most organizations, you're focused in on availability, intellectual property, and credibility and public relations as well. So those scenarios are things that we'll flush out ahead of time. And sometimes what's crazy too, Neil, is we ask companies, we're like, so what's your biggest risk? And there's this momentary pause of silence. And they're like, well, we're not really sure, why don't you walk us through what,
the department you're speaking to, like.
Yeah, true. So that threat modeling goes a long ways in helping to refine getting the best value that you can, because it's all about probability.
Yeah, and I guess that's why it's so hard to automate, because the digital risk or risk in general has so many unique layers to it from one business to the next.
Correct.
You can't automate that.
And I think what organizations should know as well too, a lot of pen testing groups feel that, when we work our way through an environment, we infiltrate, we move laterally, we escalate our privileges. Oftentimes companies or other competitors will assume that once you get this established high-level privileged account, like a domain admin, that the game's over. For us, the game is just starting, because the bad guys aren't going to stop at just gaining access to this high privileged account. They're going to do stuff with it. What are they going to do? They're going to look at your ERP systems. They're going to look at the financial data. They're going to monetize the attack. And so customers should understand that you need to have this objective oriented approach that goes beyond just gaining access to domain admin. Follow that realistic attack path.
Wow. Yeah. Then you get to really look at what the impact could be. It's from compromise to catastrophic ending, really.
Correct.
Like, how bad could this affect you on a Friday afternoon in your busiest hour, your busiest period?
End of month, kind of. Yeah, that's how it goes.
On the insurance side, certainly in our cyber claims, we're seeing more sophistication in. They love the bad guys once they're in. Unlike, as you mentioned, in the early days, I remember when I was developing websites and involved in that side of things, that we would see SQL injection, which is just a total screaming sound that you've been compromised and you've got a problem. We know, we've managed to get in. Then, as you said, that's now moved into organized crime. And organized crime are the absolute opposite. They want to sit there silent. They want to sit there just sitting and watching, and as you say, looking for the area to which they can have the most financial gain and cause you the most disruption.
That's it. It's all about the financial gain now. And that same principle, the dwell time that the attackers are taking and the time that they're spending and truly understanding your environment is greater now than it ever has been, especially with ransomware. What we saw, I won't say a cool example.
I know what you mean. We do that. I know what you mean. Like,
we had a weird, an interesting story. Yeah. Where a customer experienced a ransomware attack, but as we went through some of the analytics, we found that the attacking group had been in there for like 2 weeks. And we think that they were in there for that long because they wanted to figure out how their backups were working, and inject themselves into that backup scenario as well so they could get as much impact as possible. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a bit, we would say that on the claim side as well, that when we're seeing, when post-claim, we see when it happened, how they got in, where they got in. And it's, it's very sophisticated. It's always Friday afternoon. It's always,
Of course.
they can, invoice manipulation is very big at the moment on the cybercrime front. So they will sit there to identify within the network who's the responsible person, who's sending the invoices, what payments are going where and when, or alternatively,
Crazy.
yeah, like it's that's why your external network or your perimeter, once they're in that perimeter, we're finding on the claim side, they're, you know, they sit there dormant nearly, just waiting to pounce. And I think it's a, you know, so it's not, I think once you're compromised, often when you find out about it, as you say, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's not straight away like it used to be, where it was very disruptive.
Yeah.
You know, you'd get an alert from somewhere, and that's yeah, it's a scary place to be. What types of businesses should be considering getting pen tests, in your opinion?
What types of businesses?
Yeah,
Oh boy, that's a good question. The right answer is everybody. I think today, I think it really is. You know, when you see the impact of these attacks against the SMB space, the small to medium-sized businesses, it's more prevalent now than it ever has been.
yeah. And I think to add to that point is when we get asked, you know, who should buy cyber insurance, it used to be that you could identify businesses that would have high levels or high exposure, mainly through privacy. Like just the interconnected world, the reliance on infrastructure to transact business and the way they can be leveraged in the ways that we've mentioned. Yeah, we now sell cyber insurance to everybody. Like
That's awesome.
the industry classes, I think it's yeah, anybody that's made the transition from non-digital to digitally enabled, which 99% of businesses have, really should look at their perimeter for when it comes to pen testing, and really should consider buying an insurance policy, because definitely those two landscapes and those two pillars, like they could definitely have a positive outcome should they, one, fall victim, or two, want to avoid falling a victim. And we would certainly, as an insurer, would certainly reward and reduce premium for anyone that documents to us that they've had services such as yours.
Great.
You know, big thumbs up. We because we do scans of external networks, and we do some cyber consultancy with our insured at a very high level. We look for breach credentials when they're buying a product from us. But there is that element that only goes so far, when to really get into the grips of it, to give us true reassurance that they have taken us very seriously. And certainly using a pen test and getting a report off the back of it is tremendously useful for us as underwriters as well.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen more, and I'm not just saying this to say this, but I have absolutely seen more small to medium-sized business companies ask questions about cybersecurity insurance policies and get those policies. So
yeah, great buy. It's cheap right now.
they just see their colleagues, they see their peers, they see news headlines. And, you know, back in the day, Neil, it was like, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, there was a sense of in the cybersecurity world that we had to sell this based on like fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I hated that strategy. And I think most everybody does. It's not the case anymore, right? There is so much substance and news evidence and everything that's really driven the entire market space, with all industry verticals in mind, towards cybersecurity and getting more mature. So
yeah,
I got into this.
So you guys mainly focus on the business side. You don't do consumer, right?
No consumer on our end. Not to say that I don't get inundated with requests from my friends and family on a daily or weekly basis, but
you're a popular guy.
yeah, my answer is always two-factor authentication. By the way. Parents like, what can I do to protect my two-factor authentication?
Always two-factor, dual factor, always.
But you know, from an understanding of what work we do in the SMB versus enterprise space, it's almost literally split right down the middle. About 45-50% of our customers are SMB, and the other 50% are, you know, as big as Fortune 10, Fortune 100. And that's challenging. I'll be honest with you. It's challenging to be able to build a pricing model that is cost effective for the SMB space, but still profitable for us, you know. But we found that balance over the years of doing this.
No, congratulations on that, because I think you make a very valid point that we used to only get pen test reports of very large clients.
Yep.
And normally that was a contract requirement that they had to go through some sort of pen test, or there'd been an event, they'd fixed it, thought they'd fixed it, but they needed some external verification. Now we see them on small businesses quite often.
It's great.
Yeah, yeah. As you say, I definitely think there's been a huge shift in people's expectations or understanding of that they are and could be victims, versus, as you say, trying to just tell them about they're going to get hacked, and they think, well, I'll never get hacked, or we're never going to get hacked, or why would anyone want to hack us, or since the increase of the interconnected world, online banking are two massive factors that I think and the increase in cybercrime have definitely had certainly positive is a strange word, and you referenced cool earlier, but I do, I understand the context of it, because it's stimulated people's awareness, and that stimulated people then wanting to ensure to mitigate that risk. So it's certainly raised awareness that they are vulnerable, and they could mitigate that risk somewhat with an insurance policy or your term.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we've seen as a more positive driver towards conducting assessments and things of that nature is the business value that you can have in attesting to a secure environment. So a lot of customers that we deal with today have their vendors or suppliers or partners dictating that they're doing the right thing, and a pen test or something along those lines is included. So never before have we seen the industry at a point where security can be an enabler for making more money and driving more revenue through.
Yeah, we mirror that. We mirror that. So we're definitely seeing a lot of organizations who are looking to work with other organizations in the contracts now stipulate that there's a mandatory requirement to have a cyber liability insurance product. Just
interesting.
Where you mentioned, I would probably this year we've seen more. It's just growing that they're buying it because of a contract and a contract stipulation, which is naturally there's a commercial benefit for us for that, but it's very interesting to see that dynamic. That people, are so wary now of digital risk and the damage it can do.
Sometimes I don't care how we get across the finish line. If we're getting to a more secure environment by any means, compliance is a good thing too. A lot of people, have this evil connotation about compliance and security. Compliance doesn't equal security. And sometimes it doesn't. But I'll tell you what, I've seen compliance mandates like PCI take a company that was just very bad at security and getting them to a bare minimum standard. So, same perspective with contractual obligations that customers have. I don't care how you get there. Let's just get there.
And it's a positive as you say, it's a very positive outcome. You mentioned over the time that you've been involved in pen testing. I always like when we're speaking to somebody that's so versed in this topic and so been around to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. What are some of your war stories that you can share with us? Like without naming names, of course. Have you got any examples of times where perhaps people didn't think you could get in, or how like some even if it's quite lighthearted? Have you got anything you could share with us?
I do. I hate sounding like, if you've ever seen Step Brothers, Derek from Step Brothers, where he goes, I've got so many stories. I don't want to be that guy, but we do have some stories. There's some that certainly I will remember for the rest of my life. That's for sure. One of which, we do a lot of physical security testing. So a very cautious and very controlled exercise where we get the authorities involved and all sorts of stuff. But a few years ago, I was involved in one where our goal was to attack a court system, a judicial system, and gain access to the prosecuting attorney's office based on a very high-profile case that was going down. All right, so they wanted to make sure that they were tip-top in that regard. Now, again, rules of engagement. We got the sheriff involved ahead of time. Everybody was well aware of what we were doing. How we were.
When you reach out to the sheriff, do they go? Do they believe you? Do they think it's a scam? How do they?
Generally, we usually arrange, at least back in the day, a face-to-face conversation with our stakeholders at the city, and then bridging the sheriff together. So it's not some like, hey, yeah, here's this guy coming in and say, we're gonna break into this building. I promise it's all okay. But no, we do have great coordination, and I nominated myself to do this one, and My goal was to get into the prosecuting attorney's office and gain access to that individual's computer. And I'm not going to obviously name the state or the city that we were working in, but I had fake business cards created that said I was an IT support specialist for the state of whatever, right? And it was a pretty cool looking business card. And I did some initial stakeouts, and I looked at how the access control mechanisms were leveraged in there. It wasn't too fancy. I just needed somebody to let me into the area. And that's all I did is I walked up to this, like, you know, kind of security check gate and showed my business card and said, I'm doing a system upgrade here. I got to get into the environment. I looked the part, right? I had all the kind of stuff, the gear, and no problem. Let me in. So I walked in, and then I had to find the prosecuting attorney's office, which took me about 10, 15 minutes of loitering around, basically. Then I had to wait for that individual because that individual was in their office, and I had to wait for them to leave. Timed it around lunchtime. That individual left, jumped into the office, started plugging a USB device into this individual's laptop because the goal was to exfiltrate some data about this very high profile case. So it was going to take me time to find that data. So I figured let's just dump everything in like my documents, desktop. So as I was doing that, he returned. I thought he was gone from lunch. He was not. He came back, and the look on his face when I had some guy sitting at his desk on his computer. Yeah, it was interesting. From there, he called a deputy over. A deputy came over, and I really didn't say too much at that time. I just wanted to see how the process would go down. The deputy placed me into custody, didn't put me in handcuffs at that time, but took me into custody. And as he was walking me out, I began to explain to him what I was doing there, and that I had a get out of jail free letter literally in the back of my pocket, and that if he walked me out to the outside of the court system, that the sheriff would be waiting there and would let him know what's going on. And that's exactly what happened. It was so cool, right? I got walked out. The guy had me holding my hands, but I wasn't handcuffed. He was just holding me.
Yeah.
And then the sheriff was there with this kind of grin on his face and informed him.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't happy I got caught, but you know, it's a few times I've had that story. There have been a couple other times I and other members of my team have been in handcuffs, but we've always had.
I was going to say that's quite brave. Like, you know, you could get yourself tasered. I mean, it's pretty brave.
There's bad stories. You know, the guys at Coal Fire, I don't know if you know that story, but the Coal Fire story, you know, last year where those guys got in some deep hot water and that was a whole bad situation that went down anyways. A lot of just inconsistencies with everything, but I felt bad for those guys. But long story short, that's one. The other one that we did that's noteworthy is we were contracted to break into, how do I put this? Let's just say a company who was working on some cutting edge research and development stuff, and they wanted us to see how secure the research and development facility was. It's a big company, big campus, you know, and so the research and development building was not really well protected. No fences outside of it or anything. They had cameras all over, but it was in this big campus, so they couldn't like just line it with a fence of some sort. It looked intrusive. Long story short, I hung out in the smokers area. All right, outside the building, there was a smokers area, and it was hard, but I was going. I'm not a smoker, but I was going, working the part, feeling the part, and people would come in. People would come out, start smoking. I'd converse with them. Well, what I didn't tell you is that 2-3 days beforehand, we did a stakeout of the lobby, and on our cell phones, we managed to take pictures of people's badges. All right. And then we basically went back, we cloned those badges. Now they wouldn't do anything. It just looked like a badge. It wasn't an RFID badge, but it just looked the part. I wore that lanyard over my neck, started, having conversations with the smoker, and simple enough, I just piggybacked my way back in as he walked back in. So that individual walked back in, held the door open for me, gave me some like weird look, like, I don't know you, you're not familiar. I held up my badge and I dropped the CIO's name. I said, I'm working with CIO, whatever, Bob Smith, and just to let you know. And he, with open arms, welcomed me in, and I was in the research and development facility. And then the funny part from there is I had another individual working with me. So I walked from the back of the building to the front of the building where the visitors lobby entrance was, and pretended like I was an employee and just opened the door for the other guy to come in. And he came in, and then we went through. Long story short, we found the thing that they were seeking us for, is this big lock box suitcase, looked like it had nuclear codes in it or something. And We got it, walked out of the building, walked to the CIO and CISO's office, smacked that on the desk and said, there you go. And saw this astonished look on their face. So that
Oh,
was a good one too. That was fun.
that is a good story, and I think, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, for businesses? Like, you cannot automate that. You cannot. That has to be, you guys like nearly actors, and just blending in. It's so hard to prevent, and that's why you can have all the security test processes, but unless they're tried and tested, like you need someone to exploit, like always, the weakest link.
Yeah,
Sadly,
and physical security is I don't know. I feel somewhat of an improbable attack. If you're going to see somebody that's going to the extent of getting exposed to cameras and systems, but it can happen. You want to exercise some evaluation of your physical security controls. But one digital, we've got so many digital hacking stories. I mean, it's just crazy. But one that we recently just did a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, long story short, we found a web application vulnerability on the outside that allowed us to pivot to the inside. We moved laterally. I don't even think we gained privileged access, because what we ended up finding was we started looting through some email inboxes of some high value targets. And oftentimes we find that people store some really sensitive critical information in email or local workstations. And long story short, we found a password document that led us to their online banking system for the organization, for the business, for this multi-billion-dollar organization.
holy moly.
Found out that one of their banking accounts didn't have single factor. So we just proved that we could gain access to their online banking, and there was roughly, I think, $500 to $700 million in that account that we had initial access to, and could have done a lot of nefarious things. But that's what I'm talking about when you move into a realistic attack path, not just gaining privileged access, knowing what the bad guys are going to go after and following that path.
No, that is crazy, and so interesting to hear about the differences between the two. One of the things that we've seen, and I'm sure probably you've seen on the sort of digital pen testing side, is since COVID-19, we've definitely seen a spike in activity in and around themes around COVID-19 and scams. And I think that what we're certainly have come to learn over the last few years is that scammers, criminals, whatever you want to call them, often follow trends, whether it's seasonal, whether it's kind of in the press, whether it's whatever it might be, but it's in the mind's eye of the person that they're trying to con or convince to do. So it could be, we've seen them when it's the tax year. What have you guys, or what have you seen around COVID-19, if anything?
Whew, we've seen a lot. First of all, you're right, man. It is an opportunistic play. These guys are going to take advantage of whatever fear, uncertainty, and doubt variable they can capitalize on as well. So with COVID comes a great opportunity for them to try to capitalize on this as an opportunistic attack. And yeah, we've seen quite a bit. We've seen obviously an increase. Initially, we saw an increase of COVID and Corona-related phishing attacks and spear phishing attacks. We saw a focus on more malicious adversary groups taking advantage of the digital transformation and the remote telecommuting and the remote workforce. We're running some attacks that are a little old school. Now again, because of this remote workforce perspective, it's opening up a lot of risks that companies aren't necessarily able to respond to, because they're just trying to keep the lights on, right? Companies got to make money, and they got to do that first before we can spend any money on security. So
I think when they're in that phase, that's when they're most vulnerable.
Agreed.
Because they're not, and they should, but they're not. The top of their line of concern isn't about security. It's about staying alive, keeping the business alive, moving from the day-to-day that they used to work into a completely different environment. Some have been successful, some have struggled with that transition, some are more effective than others. And I just think that's, we're seeing the bad guys, they just don't care. Like they have no remorse when it comes to whether you're a bank, hospital, care home. We've had some really questionable events where you question,
Sure.
all sort of sincerity of these people, and they're they're conscious. I mean, they will pounce on anyone at their worst possible time. And so I definitely think what this has done is, as you mentioned, the moving back to some old methods of pen testing, because people have reverted, in many ways, reverted back to ways they used to work or interact. And it's it's a very vulnerable time, I think, for a lot
Yeah.
of, both commercially, but from a cyber risk standpoint, it's never been worse, I think.
Not only do they not care, those are the best targets, like you mentioned. You know, the targets that are just trying to keep the lights on. Those are what these bad guys want to go after by any means necessary. I mean, you see ransomware attacks against hospitals that are dealing with the peak of coronavirus patients. I mean, there is no moral line for these guys, right? And what I'm trying to tell those companies, Neil, is I think the same thing you're trying to do too, is let's not make a bad situation that much worse. Think about what the impact would be of a real malicious attack in this state of our organization. It could be detrimental. It could literally, be the make or break scenario between us being viable, staying in business, or not. I hate saying it because it sounds a little FUD related, but there are companies that go out of business as a result of these attacks when they're not well positioned to be able. And now more than ever is a precarious state. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
It's a very scary time, and people certainly need to really be on their A game, to both as leadership, with their staff, with their community, because it's incredibly difficult. One of the things that, as we're coming up to the time, one of the things I always like to do with anyone that I have on is, in your pen testing world, you've seen the last 12 years, 15 years. Where is it going in the next 5? Like, if you were to think how far we've come in the last 5, where do you see it in the next 5 years?
That's a good question too. We've come a long ways in the last 5 years, I think, and I think we'll see some real awesome transformation in the next 5. Here's what I think at a high level. I think traditional penetration testing, I don't want to say is dead, but maybe it should be. And let me explain that. That strikes a lot of people by fear. But a traditional penetration test is all about finding the risks, the advanced threats, documenting how that's done, and prescribing a report that tells you, what the recommendations and remediation should be. Make no mistake, we still need to do that. But I think what organizations should expect is they should expect more from the pen test in the next 5 years. What they should expect is having an organization or an entity come in that has the capability to not only identify those advanced, sophisticated threats, but also evaluate the effectiveness of your controls. What do I mean by that? Organizations spend a ton of money and resources into their investments for cybersecurity, antivirus, EDR, firewalls, IDS, SIM. So, I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity for an organization to see how well those tools hold up during a pen test. And that's the approach that we take when we do our engagements is, as we run certain attacks, we'll reach out to the customer. We'll say, hey, we just ran, a deserialization attack on your web app or a password spraying attack on your VPN. Were you able to see that? Could you detect that? Because your ability to find these malicious attackers early on in the kill chain and cut them off when you can, that's instrumental. So I think overall in the next 5 years, you're going to see an adoption to that mentality and that methodology. I also think, Neil, that the as a service model will gain a little bit more traction. We're building something on our own as well here at CBI, but I think we need to make it easier for the industry to conduct penetration tests and application assessments and have a centralized portal for them to be able to track and manage these things. So you're seeing the as a service model gain a little momentum. I don't think it's going to dominate the industry. There's advantages and disadvantages of that scenario, but certainly something I think that we'll see a little bit more of. And then, I hate using buzzwords, AI, machine learning.
I was going to ask about AI. You've got to talk about it.
Listen, I think 5 years, I don't know what advancements we'll see in AI. All right. What I do think is you'll start to see a little bit of some value prop and some early AI machine learning, but we're not there yet. we're not even close to there yet in regards to seeing algorithms fighting algorithms from a red team, blue team perspective. But make no mistake, I think in 10, 15, 20 years, that's what we'll largely be dealing with is basically fighting, AI against different AI and having human beings help tweak those algorithms to
Yeah,
respond to the attack. But
yeah, that's I think you're likely right, and I think the problem isn't going away. It's certainly showing no shift or decline. It's only ramping up. I think as the interconnected world continues, I think the power. We did a wonderful podcast last week with a gentleman who specializes in denial of service attacks, and he was explaining just the weight over the last sort of 10 years or 5 years, the weight that comes with the attacks now as they're able to compromise more botnets and build their army. And I think you're right, that would certainly lead you down the very probable route of AI fighting AI.
oh yeah, and that DOS scenario, so
Yeah,
true.
yeah. And then there was also, I think, the frequency, I imagine, through what you were saying as well, with making pen tests easier, I could certainly see, because when we see pen tests come to us, they're very ad hoc. Once a year, once a 3 year, once a 5 year. Whereas I think as you could probably be looking to bring that down to once every 6 months, once every quarter, or maybe even ongoing pen testing or simulations in some way.
Yeah, we've got customers that do that same thing. They've got business requirements that demand more cyclical and frequent testing, anywhere from monthly, quarterly, biannually.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think
Yeah, we can see that. All right. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been fantastic. You've been a wonderful guest, very open and honest, and we look forward to speaking with you more in the future.
I love this opportunity. Thank you, Neil. It's a great podcast, and we'll be talking again soon sometime.
All right, Shaun. You take care.
All right, you as well.